I recognize a lot of faces here, but if you don't know me, my name is John Tyndall, and I work in the Systems Development Group with CLC here at Penn State. I'm part of the Systems Management team at Penn State, along with Matt Boyd, who's going to come up and help me with the presentation here. So we provide a systems management platform for campuses and colleges to use free of charge. So, So what we're going to do is talk about packaging and deploying software. It's kind of hard doing something like this in a presentation format. You almost kind of need to be doing it. So we'll do our best. This is kind of a foundational session, kind of an introduction to help you get started with packaging software and deploying it with Tivoli Endpoint Manager. So Tivoli Endpoint Manager, which we'll affectionately refer to as TEM, is a very powerful platform. And it really helps you do, in the realm of software deployment, helps you distribute your applications and your binaries to Macs. It also executes shell commands so that you can install these applications onto your Macs. And it also provides a mechanism to determine if the software installers have installed, and if they haven't, it helps you to remediate them so that they retry and they also get installed. So that's very nice. So we actually do have quite a bit of slides to get through, so we'll try to get through them fast. But if you only walk away with a couple things, I hope you just know what the basic components of TEM are, what the key components are that actually make up everything. We also want to learn how to write software installer tasks, duh. And then, because it's good to have 3 bullet points, something about troubleshooting and maintenance, maybe some best practices of how you can supercharge your environment. So these are really the key components of TEM. We have Fixlets and tasks, which is how you do stuff with TEM. You also have actions, which is what's comprised of these. This is how you get stuff done. And it's all kind of tied together with relevance. This is how you get information from your computers. So we'll go over some quick terminology. A fixlet fixes things. So by definition, how it works is that it detects a vulnerability. So say you have something like Safari that's out of date or a point release to OS 10. So the fixlet fixes that, and when it's fixed, then this is no longer relevant. So by definition, how that compares to a task kind of executes things. And so it doesn't necessarily become true or false after it's done. It just executes. And I guess an example might be, say, rename a computer or maybe move a computer to a different group. And so that's by definition. But in practice, they're pretty much the same thing. Functionally, they do the same thing. It's just a sequence of actions that they execute. And we really only use them as an organizational tool. So for instance, we do fixlets as, say, like power settings, and tasks we keep as software installers. The other thing we kind of do is we kind of merge them together by writing our tasks kind of as fixlets, so they're tasklets, I guess you would call them. So, and all that means, which we'll see, is we just write the tasks so that after it executes, it is not relevant anymore. And this just helps us with organization, help us to know what's going on. So once we have that, now we can look at actions. These are the sequence of commands that actually do things. When you set an action, it actually changes your machine and manipulates things. So you kind of think of it as a scripting language because that's what it is. And so what an action script does is it kind of abstracts everything. So this is helpful because TEM works in multiple platforms. So you don't have to sit around and remember that the delete command in Mac is RM, or maybe it's DEL, or maybe that's Windows. So this kind of makes it easy for you to execute the same things over and over again in different platforms. So this is an example of some action script. If you know a scripting language, or even if you don't, I think it's pretty simple to follow along and see what's going on. After all, this is a Mac conference, so if you roll with shell scripting, you don't actually have to use TEM action script. You can use shell scripting. But what's nice about TEM is that you can integrate your shell scripts into the action script. So you can create a shell script and then execute the command. We can also do AppleScript, and you guessed it, we can also integrate that into here. And what's nice about doing it with ActionScript is that each command through TEM is logged. So you can see that it actually deletes the file, or it creates the file, and then it executes it. Whereas you don't really get that when you do the scripting. So here's a way that you can integrate things. So if you're more comfortable with shell scripting or AppleScript, integrate it like that. So if actions are the things that modify things on your computers, then how Relevance compares to that is it actually doesn't modify anything. It's more of a query language. But I think we're going to find out that Relevance is actually what ties everything together. This is what makes things work and how you get information from your machines. So if we look at Relevance, it kind of looks like a scripting language, because it kind of is. Like I said, it just really doesn't do the same things, but it's similar. And it can be really, really simple to help you determine your operating system or determine, whether or not an application is installed. It can also be pretty complex. It can get pretty crazy and tricky. It plays tricks on you. You play tricks back. And it's almost kind of like a cable knit sweater that someone just keeps knitting and knitting and knitting and knitting. So be careful with that. But what's nice about it is that you can integrate your relevance into your actions. And so we'll look at that, because that will help you, this whole idea of abstraction again, so that you don't have to worry about where an application is installed and things like that. So we're going to look at that. And right now, we're going to look at some relevance. So we're going to see here, you can use this to query things like your operating system. So in this example, we want to look at an operating system who is Mac OS and is greater than 10.5. So as you can see, it kind of follows the English language. The name of the operating system equals Mac OS 10. So can't get much easier than that. Where it gets a little tricky, but it's still pretty readable, we're looking whose operating system as a version, or the version of the operating system, is 10.5. So the it, if you want to get tricky, refers to this operating system, direct object, things like that. But we don't care as long as we can just keep on reusing this, what's it called, structure or grammar. So a little bit different might be the case where you want a specific set of operating systems. So maybe not just 10.5, because that would include 10.8 or 10.9 and things like that. So you want a separate one. So it's the same idea where, and you can use logical operators to kind of get that range. So this is what we're doing here. We can use the same structure to query our applications. So if we're looking for iTunes, and this is what's nice about the relevance language, is because we don't really have to worry about where it's actually located. Because Mac is nice because you have your application bundle, and you click it or double click it or whatever you do, and it runs. And so if you have, we all have the users who kind of just put stuff anywhere. So since it double clicks, or since it clicks and opens up, maybe they stick it on their desktop, or maybe they stick it in documents, things like that. So we don't really have to worry about where it is. The relevance takes care of it so that you don't have to account for every single possible location. So a couple other things to notice. We have version of it, whereas before we had it as version. So if you think of like a programming language like C++ or even Java, it's very structured. Probably whoever wrote it, came up with it, probably followed something like Latin, where you have specific grammars. This relevance language was most definitely written by someone who speaks English, because you can change things a lot. And you don't have to do it the same way. So version of it is the same thing as it is version. You can change things around. So it makes it a little confusing, but once you can understand the key concepts, it's pretty easy to do. So that was to see if iTunes was installed. But now, if we're going to be doing software deployment, we really need to ask the question, should I install it? So this is kind of where it gets a little tricky sometimes when you're doing things, because you really want to reverse it. So you don't want to check that iTunes is installed. You want to check two conditions. One, that iTunes is not installed. And then another condition is where iTunes is installed, but the one that you're installing is not newer than what's already there. So it's kind of confusing, but once you look at it, we're just making sure that iTunes doesn't already exist. And if it does exist, we want to make sure that it's not newer than what we already have. And so we can also then, for the instance of iTunes, it also depends on Safari. So we want to make sure that Safari is there, but it's also a specific version or greater. So we can write that as normal. So those are just a few quick examples of relevance. So now we're going to talk about creating a software task and actually get into how we do this. The important thing to note is that if you can do it through the command line, then chances are pretty good that you're going to be able to do it through temp, because we execute commands, and this is how it works. So if you think about the process of how you install software, you download, then you go, and things are usually wrapped in a DMG or a zip file or something like that. So you mount it, extract it, then you run your installer, and you're good to go. So Mac is very click happy, but anything you can do with the mouse, you can pretty much do through the command line. So this is actually a command that you would use to mount a DMG. And we also need to just touch upon the notion of silent and unattended, because we don't want to interact with the user sessions. So when you do, what's nice about the command line is when you do things this way, you have switches that you can use to make it silent. Similarly with application bundles, it's real easy. All you just do is a straight copy into an applications folder or wherever you want it to go. And same thing with installing a package. We have a command for that. And that's pretty much it. The Macs actually have it pretty easy as far as installing software is concerned. So if we think about what we want to do, we're going to download, we're going to unpack, we're going to install, and then we're going to clean up our mess. So if you take an action to install something like Flash Player, kind of looks like a lot of fluff. But if we break it up into our algorithm, we see we have the download, we have the mount, we have the run, and then we have the cleanup. So when you want to go and download, we see we have the action script. It actually goes and downloads a DMG directly from Adobe's site, and then it checks to make sure, this is kind of standard practice, just to make sure that the file you download is the file that you want. When we go to the mounting section, again, we're just going to go and mount, and that middle command there is the same command line that we issued before to go and mount the installer. And then if you think about things like Firefox or Chrome, these are wrapped inside a DMG, but they're wrapped as an application bundle, so you can just copy them over. Flash is not the same. It has an app, but it doesn't actually run. It contains an installer. So we can go in and open that up and then copy that to a temporary location so that we can run it. And then we just run the installer command to install the package. And then when we're done, we just clean everything up. We can use the same HDI util command to unmount, then clean up our junk. So then we need to figure out with the task how we can make it so that it'll be applicable to other machines. How can we get it to install? So you do that with Relevance. In this case, we're going to use 2 pieces of Relevance. We want to make sure that it installs on 10.5, 10.6, and 10.7, either because that's what it's compatible on, or because that's what we tested it on and say it's going to work on. So this is the same command or the same statement that we used from before. In the previous example, we looked at iTunes, where we could actually query the app to see what version it was. In the case of Flash, it doesn't work that way. It doesn't actually have an application, but it does still write stuff to the hard drive. So if you're familiar with Windows, we have a thing called registry, where we can look at things and it stores versions. Mac equivalent is a plist. So if you look at the structure, it's kind of the same exact thing. We're looking to see if the plist is there, or if it's not. If it's not there, that means we don't have it. And then we can extract the version. And as you can see, it's similar to the same way we did it with the application bundle. The other thing we do is we had talked about the notion of fixlets and tasks and tasklets. The other thing that we'd like to do is, what happens in the action script is if all the commands execute, then it considers it succeeded. And that's fine, but we can find out more about our installation if we change things so that it looks at the relevance again. And so this is just a quick check mark you can make when you're making your tasks, just to set it so that it evaluates the false. Otherwise, whether or not your command executed successfully, it'll say it's completed. So that's pretty much how you make a task. But you're probably wondering, like, where did I come up with this SHA-1 hash? Where did I come up with all this action script? Did I just copy it off of MAT? Or, how did I come up with it? Well, what's nice about TEM is that it has a wizard for Windows and Mac so that you can create these things and make your life a little bit easier so you don't have to remember all these commands. So we'll just step through really quickly. It makes more sense when you do it. But you're going to get a window. You want to put in your application. We like to go vendor, title, and then version so that you know. This is especially helpful when you have many pieces of software. Then you want to upload your file. And there's a couple different ways to do this. I always like to actually upload the file, because you get into situations, you can download it like we did from Adobe. But if you think of something like Chrome, maybe, when you download that DMG, it's always called chrome.dmg, and the path to download it is always the same place. So that's cool and that's nice, but if you really need to install, say, Chrome 18, and you point it to Google, then a week later or a month later, you want to install. You still want to install Chrome 18. Well, it may not necessarily be Chrome 18 anymore. So, in order to organize things, I always just get in the habit of uploading. So, you probably should too. But the rest of it's pretty easy. You can go in and generate your own relevance for the operating systems. If you only tested it in 10.6 and 10.7, just click that and you're good to go. Here we can generate some of our relevance to make it a little bit easier for us. So you can say, I want to install Identity Finder on machines where Identity Finder isn't there. So that takes care of half of it for you, but we'll see that we're going to have to make a few changes. So all you do now, after you have a description, upload it, and then voila, you have a shiny new task. So I said we had to change some things. As you can see, we have the operating system version, and this first part of the second relevance was what we put in the Identity Finder app. And so that takes care of that case where Identity Finder isn't there. But part of the reason why we install software is also to update things. So we had to go and put in this second half of it. And as again, I could have combined it if I wanted to, but as I said, there's many, many different ways that you can write your relevance. So in this case, just for an example, I separated them out. So you just have to make sure that you add in your relevance to check for the version. Now, the wizard thinks that is pretty cool, as I'm sure most wizards do. So what it tries to do is account for every single installer that it can possibly think of. So, and it tries to account for that. So it tries to detect if it's a PKG or an MPKG, or if it's an app, or if it needs to be installed with AppleScript or whatever. Maybe we just need to copy things like that. And that's cool. I appreciate it, but it doesn't always work so well. You see all that pink stuff as relevance, and it works, but it doesn't always work all the time. So what I like to do is just get rid of it. And it's a lot easier to actually write your own install command using the stuff that I showed earlier. And this is just because things can go wrong. And Identity Finder is actually one of them where it doesn't like the relevance, and for some reason it doesn't work. So I just say, the heck with it, and get rid of it and write my own. The other thing that it does is it doesn't put in this no browse command, and that could be fine, but sometimes I found, depending on the Mac or depending on the version, that it doesn't work. So I always just like to add that in. So the wizard is kind of functional, but there's ways that we can make it better, and for now, this is kind of how we can deal with that. So that's pretty much how you make a task. And like I said, Macs are pretty easy because out of all the ones I've done some combination of that. It's either a PKG and I run that install, or it's a DMG with an app bundle, so I copy that over. And I think for most applications that you find, it's going to be some combination of that. But things do go wrong. So we'll look at a couple ways that we can do some basic troubleshooting. The first one's pretty easy. If you go into your console, you can see the action that you took. And it's relatively, relatively live in real time. So as it steps through the different steps of your command, you'll get to see. In this case, it fails on line 2. So in this case, you see the second part is checking to see if Firefox is running. And this is actually probably where it failed. If Firefox is open, then this thing is going to quit and stop right there. But it may fail lower. And so if it failed on one of these commands down here, it might be because I have a command screwed up. Maybe the relevance is wrong, or maybe something got hung up somewhere. So this is a good first place to check to see, what's going on. The second place, if you want to get more detail, as I had alluded to earlier, when you're using ActionScript, the temp agent that runs on the machine logs everything, so which is pretty nice. So you can go into this log. It's in the same place in every machine. And you can't see it here, but it'll tell you, it does a pretty good job of telling you if your relevance is messed up. It does an okay job of telling you if the task fails. You really want to look for exit codes of 0. That means that things are cool and that your command did what it supposedly should do. So you want to look in here, make sure. This will give you a little bit better idea of what's going on. Mac is cool, but this is a Windows application, and so that's what it started out as, and then they're like, oh yeah, we have a Mac market, so maybe we should do some things with Mac. So it's not quite up to speed where the Windows side is. On the Windows side, we can execute single lines of ActionScript, and that's nice. We don't have that yet on the Mac, but we do have what's called the Mac Q&A. It's located in the installer bundle for the temp agent. And so what you can do is you can run this to using relevance commands. And I use this all the time to start small, building my relevance, and then making it more and more complex as it goes. So this is a good tool if you want to test out different things. This way you don't have to send out an action every single time you want to try something. And if you get tricky relevance clauses, you don't have to, you can make sure that each piece works and then piece it together. So I really recommend using this tool, not only when you run into problems, but as you're building things. So it can be the case where you just can't get it, and we'd rather you not sit around and pull your hair out. So if you're having trouble, or you're ready to dump the product, talk to us. We just ask that you just give us enough information so that we can help see what's going on. Maybe we can reproduce the problem. Because we're here to help. So you send us an email, talk to us, call us up. We'll help you out. The other thing to mention is always just make sure you have a test environment. We like to have machines for each version of each operating system we have. And if we have Macs and MacBook Pros, we always make sure we have one of those so that when we say stuff will work on here, that it really does. So we're almost done. I just wanted to give you a couple ways that you can do things to make things a little bit better. I know we all hate to do it, but we really love our users, so we try our best to work around them and make things a little bit better for them. So one way that we can do that is we don't want to interrupt their session. So you'll see in the tasks that we create, we have a couple different actions, and one of the things that we do is we make sure that when we're installing an application, we don't want it to interrupt or mess with dependent applications. So in the case of Flash, if we're installing that, if you try to install it when browsers are open, it either fails or it screws things up. So one way that we can get around that is just check and see if it's working, or see if they're running. And these are just, again, the power of relevance. Easy ways that you can do it. And it works for everything. So if you do something like this, though, it's probably best if you set your tasks as a policy. This way, whenever they finally close the application, then it'll run. This is for when you really don't care anymore, that things have been going on so long. Your chancellor or dean has Chrome up for 3 months because he's playing Angry Birds. He has it paused. It's not going anywhere. So you just want to be done with it. So we can send a shell command and kill the process ID. Again, notice the relevance. It's the whole idea of abstraction. We don't have to worry about what the process ID is. We can automatically get that at runtime. So we kill that task. The other thing I like to do is make sure it's really dead. It's usually on Windows that you try to kill a process. And even though the wait command will wait until the shell command executes, that doesn't necessarily mean that the process is done killing yet. So I always like to throw in this little clause right here just to make sure that things are really dead. So that's kind of handling things in the mildest Davis method in a silent way. So sometimes, though, we really want to, sometimes it's better just to show a message and say, hey, we really don't want to kill the process. So we say, hey, we'll display a message, say, we're going to install software. We're going to, so please close your browser and all that stuff. The other thing we can do is empower our users, especially if you're running least privilege mode. We don't let them install software, but we can give them the idea that they're installing software by giving offers, allowing them to choose what they want to install. So that's an option as well. And when you do things like this, they get a nice little pop-up saying, what's available. In this message, I combine my offer with my message, but it's important to note that you don't have to have an offer to have a message. So what would happen is this message on top would pop up, and they can decide to take the action now, they can postpone it a while. You'll set these things when you're creating the task, or actually when you're deploying the action. And then the messages could run saying, please wait until everything's done. I probably wouldn't use a message like that, but you get the idea. So we'll talk real quick about organizing baselines, or organizing installers with baselines. These are just groups and ways to, mainly for you to respect yourself a little bit so that you can organize your installers. What this does is kind of put things in a logical order. So you don't really have to do it this way, but sometimes it's a good idea to install drivers and utilities first, then have another baseline that goes to all the different machines in your environment. Then you have, say, another granular one that goes for departmental software. And this thing, because maybe you have an application like Fit that you really don't want to be going on to faculty computers because what do they know about budgeting and things like that. So things like that, if you have music software, science software, and really, this is how you do it. You just put all your stuff into your baseline, goes in order, so top down. And the way that we get things to work and automate things is we can create a little text file at the end of these things to show that we've completed. And then so a relevance for the phase 3 baseline would check for this phase 2 text. And then so if you have these things open as policies, then it won't run until it sees that this is completed. So this is kind of a nice way to organize things. So it just makes your life a little bit easier, especially when you're troubleshooting things. Another thing you can do to respect yourself, put things in automatic groups. You don't really want to put things like, you don't want to deploy tasks to individual computers, because if these go away or get deleted, then you'll have tasks open that don't really point to anything, and this is why the console gets slow and stuff like that. So if you have automatic groups, the computer it does what it says. It automatically goes into the group, and then if it dies, it'll leave, and you don't have to do anything. So when you set tasks to specific groups, you don't have to worry that you're having orphaned actions. So they're really easy to set. You can set them practically by anything you want. OS, you can look at the computer names. Say if you have computer names for different departments, then you can have departmental software. Maybe if you put a plist or something, you can go and make your things based off that. There's a thing called analyses, which is kind of like relevance, but instead of using relevance as a true-false situation, we kind of use it to retrieve information from us. And the best way to look at it, I think you probably all have seen it, is when you get computer information, you see all this stuff that's organized, really pretty, and all that. So you can actually write your own, and just an example of how you do that, it depends on what information you want. For us, we install some software. We want to make sure that we want to know when it's installed and where it is. So again, we can write some relevance where we create a plist to put this information in here. So we can just write some relevance the way I do it, the Mac Q&A inspector, and we can get this information, and then when your computer checks in, you get something like this. So we can see what software we installed, what task we used, when it was installed, things like that. So the best way to learn how to do those is just kind of look at the analyses that are there, see something that you like, kind of copy it and modify it to how you want to do it. The other thing you can do is, we won't get too much into web reports of how to make them. That could probably be a whole nother session, but I'll just show you what's already there. If you log in to web reports, then if you do a search for the label SysMan, you'll see that we have some pre-made reports for you. So you can see what applications you already have installed, or you can see if you have many tasks and baselines, especially if you're doing labs. Things can get kind of crazy. You may have hundreds of pieces of software. Probably not a good idea, but if you have a lot, will help you figure out where you have duplicates. I had talked earlier about making sure that your actions go to groups of machines instead of single machines. Well, we have a report for that where you can go and look and see if you have orphaned actions. Another good one to look at is repeating actions. So if you have an action that has failed many times, then you can use this report to take a look at that. That way, it makes it a little bit easier than digging through the console and digging through your applications or your action histories. And this just makes it a little bit easier for you to see what's going on and to help troubleshoot things. Because if things aren't getting installed, this is a good place to look. This one is similar. It helps you see how many computers things are failing on. So we'll finish up by saying there's a lot of different resources that you can do. So you don't want to do too much work on here. You don't want to be reproducing efforts. So a lot of the stuff that you're looking for is pretty much done for you. IBM is getting a lot better, and the vendors are working with them to actually provide tasks and Fixlets for common applications. So things like iTunes or Adobe Reader, Java, things like that, even the point releases, the Apple updates, things like that are being provided by IBM. So you don't have to go around and mess with creating them. We also provide a lot of stuff for you guys. We have a component of SysMan called software sharing, where we provide a lot of the applications that we find are most commonly used throughout the university. So a lot of your freeware apps, a lot of most of the stuff that's on downloads.its.psu.edu, we package all that for you. We also take requests as well. So if you have applications that you think would benefit the university, or tasks or Fixlets or anything like that, feel free to send us your ideas, and we're more than happy to try to package those up and provide them for you so you guys don't have to do the work. And we can't promise everything, but we'll definitely try. And the thing to know with our tasks is that we actually regularly test them. So when we say it works on 10.6 or 10.7, we actually mean it, because we go and test every single action. We try to test it different scenarios. We make sure that it works, and on different things as well. So you can be sure that if it's in here, it's been thoroughly vested. So I think that's actually pretty much it. We are actually having our first ever SysMan Town Hall meeting in June. So I know it's kind of small to read the link, but if you guys are all welcome to attend. If you're part of CLM, we have a separate one for that, and if you come, you get a lunch and you get out of work for free, so it's very nice. But we would love to have you. We're going to kind of talk about where we're going, where we've been, things that are on the horizon, and anything that you guys really want to talk about as well. So I'll just give that little plug. And then that's pretty much it. Here's some resources that you can look at. The one thing I'll just point out is this is a Windows console, so you can't use the latest version of Microsoft Remote Desktop Client. So I like to use Cord. It's an open source tool. So if you're doing it strictly from Macs, I would use that. But that's pretty much it. That's, like I said, it's kind of hard doing a presentation like this in a presentation format. So we're thinking of, we're toying with the idea of possibly offering a class in how to do this stuff, where it can be more hands-on, where we can actually get dirty and create tasks. And so that's in the works. Would anyone here be interested in something like that? Okay, cool. I guess we have some work to do then. But so that's on the horizon. So hopefully this was useful in that if you've never done packaging for Macs, hopefully this was a good introduction. So the slides will be online, so you can use this as a guide when you're building your tasks. But if you want to talk more advanced stuff, Matt and I are here. We're willing to chat with you, see how you do things in your environment, things like that. If you have any questions, you can ask me now or talk with us later. Cool. Go ahead and get the snacks. Thanks.